Hey, good morning, everyone. Are we ready? Okay, cool. Hello, good morning. My name is Clem. I work as a product lead at Li.Fi. In case you don't know Li.Fi, Li.Fi is one API to tap into all of DeFi's liquidity. We are aggregating bridges, DEXs, DEX aggregators, and we are offering like kind of one comprehensive API for you to be able to offer any route to your users for any token to any token. And today, the topic of the presentation is trying to make sense of Intents and its ecosystem. I think the presentation that was given earlier was more technical and developer oriented, but this one is going to be more looking at it from the perspective of a product manager, who I am, and trying to understand a little bit the behavior of the different stakeholders, their needs, and then also give a little bit of background on like intents, where they originated from, and what are the current challenges that we see today with the ecosystem. I would love for us to go to the next slide. Or do I have, is this the, okay, cool. Yeah, so this is the rough agenda, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I want to make sure we have time maybe for questions. So if we are looking at intents and where they originated from, how many of you are completely familiar with the flow already? Okay, cool. So it's still like a minority, but essentially what intents are about, they are about decoupling the execution from the verification logic for when users submit transactions on chain. And so what this means in practice is that historically, because the EVM is primarily EOA based, we've had users being responsible for signing and broadcasting transactions to the network themselves, and also basically manually handling all the execution parameters, which is the reason why, you know, legacy UX like MetaMask, for instance, are still quite cumbersome for new users because users get exposed to all these parameters when they submit transactions on chain. And so that's historically how transactions have been carried and have been made for a long time. But then quite recently, well, actually, you could argue for a few years now, depending on like which projects you're looking at, but more and more, there's been standardization to effectively push forward intent-based transaction flows. And so what an intent-based transaction flow is, I think the colleague earlier explained that quite well, is that we are decoupling the execution from the verification of the transaction, and we are delegating the execution to third parties who are responsible for executing the transaction on our behalf. And so what we have in the end is a user simply signing an intent, which can be any arbitrary message that dictates the terms and conditions of what they want to execute, being very user-centric, and that gets in the end executed by some solvers. We will go into the detail of like what actually they do and how they organize themselves to solve in a moment. So what are the user benefits of that approach? There's actually many user benefits for, you know, intents to take off and to, I believe, eventually take over the more classic transaction flow. From a UX perspective, it's quite basic actually when you think about it, the benefits that we get from it, but it's 101 if we want to build products for the mass market. So on one hand, we have gasless flows. If you are familiar with 4337 already, 4337 is essentially an intents-based flow because you're delegating the execution of your transactions to bundlers and to a bunch of other third parties who are executing the transaction for you. Then you also have stuff like MEV protection. That's also something that's, you know, very important in today's world where you have block builders who are looking to extract as much value as possible when building blocks, and effectively building that transaction off-chain allows you to protect yourself from these actors. Then you also have cheaper execution. So we we will talk about that in a moment, but effectively routing and delegating the execution to third-party solvers allow you to get like better execution price on your trades, simply because they have much more context and they are much more context aware about all the different paths and combination possible for your trade than you are, right? Like if you are a newbie user and you have just your MetaMask account and you want to transfer your fund from one chain to the other, likely if you're not delegating that routing to someone else, unless maybe you use Li.Fi, it's going to be difficult for you to get the best possible price. And then in the context of cross-chain transactions, what Intents also allow us to do is that they allow us to have near-instant cross-chain order fulfillments. And so this is really cool because what was not possible before, and where before using canonical bridges we would require minutes if not hours to get funds from one chain to the other. Today we can effectively fully delegate the fulfillment of our orders to solvers and get our intent executed before ourselves being debited. We'll also talk about that a bit more in a moment. Then there's a plethora of also new on-chain functionalities that Intents unlock, not just like UX, but functionality directly. We can think in terms of programmable orders, derivatives, swaps, limit orders. If you want to experiment a little bit with that, I recommend that you use Cow, especially if you place like large trades, because they allow for all of these kind of more sophisticated orders, and ultimately this wouldn't be possible without Intents. At least they wouldn't be possible on-chain, because you can do all of this stuff, fully off-chain if you're just using like a regular order book, off-chain order book. So solvers. So solvers, I don't know if anyone's gonna get that here, but I wrote solvers handyman on steroids, just because they do so much stuff right now in the value chain that I think it's important to highlight, especially for when we're gonna talk about the challenges that they face in a moment. But effectively, solvers are responsible for the routing of your transactions. So, as we said earlier, if you want to go from point A to point B, you just simply, share that as an intent to an off-chain set of solvers who will then be responsible for finding the best optimal path for you. And so that means that they're going to be scanning many different avenues for your trade, and they will come back with the best. Now, how do we define what is the best for you? Well, we define what is best through the competition type that the solver engages in. So that means currently we have different type of settlement networks and protocols that effectively have different competition types. 1inch, for instance, relies on Dutch auction, but if you're looking at Cow, they rely on batch auctions, also coupled with coincidence of wants. And all of these are designed in such a way that the winner of the auction will be able to execute your trade on your behalf, and you will get the best possible terms for your trade. These competition are happening off-chain for the most part. And they vary in types. Today, I would say, we see a lot of solvers also operating cross-protocol. We will also talk about that in a moment, but there is a good deal of solvers who are currently solving on multiple settlement networks just in order to increase the amount of order flow that they can solve for. Another key task of solvers that they also do, so they do routing, they participate in this competition, but in order for them to do all these things, they also need to be liquidity sourcing. That's another key heavy lift task, because what this means is that they need to bring the capital for you in order for you to be able to execute your trade. There's many ways people do that currently, either via public liquidity pools or private venues. By private venues, I mean that many solvers, for instance, strike deals either with private market makers or by getting funds directly from the organization that they work with to use these funds in the solving process. And we see in the market that actually the majority of solvers use some kind of hybrid model, mixing their own liquidity with public liquidity to be able to offer the best, most competitive quotes. And lastly, another thing that solvers have to deal with currently is that they need to manage and monitor their positions on multiple settlement networks. What this means here is that ultimately, whenever you go and you front funds for users, you kind of open a credit line for them, and you have to take care of all the rebalancing and managing your assets in a multi-chain world. So yeah, they do a lot of stuff for us. Cross-chain order flow. I don't want to spend too much time on this actually, because we only have 9 minutes left, and I think there was a good deal of explaining what the flow looks like. But it's fairly simple. You have an escrow type of model or a resource lock type of model from which effectively solvers are able to auction off your order, and then once they take your order, they have to submit a proof, or they have to be able to generate a proof. They don't necessarily have to submit it, that they executed on the target chain. And that proof can be challenged in most optimistic designs. We're going to talk about that also in a second. But yeah, the flow is essentially the following, and as highlighted on the graph. Once it's proven that the transaction was fulfilled, it should be easy for the solver to claim back the funds from the user. So if we're looking at it from a stakeholder needs perspective, we have applications who want the best cross-chain coverage. What I mean by best is, I mean best execution price, best routing, most comprehensive, also offering for a multi-chain, cross-chain context, best support for chains as possible, so that they can cover as much a large target user group. Then for users, we have obviously the need for the best user experience. If I trade, I want to have the best execution terms that are out there. And for solvers, they want to win the auction for profit, which I think I kind of purposefully added profit and not just revenue here, because we're going to talk about it in a moment. But there is ultimately the need for everyone in this industry to build a sustainable business, and it doesn't seem as straightforward as that currently, given the market conditions, especially for solvers. On the liquidity provider side, we have solvers relying on these liquidity sources, but if you're a liquidity provider, it's fair to assume that you want return on your capital that beats the market. And if we assume that the risk-free rate is maybe the USDC yield in some lending contract, then you should make sure that whatever you're charging on top of the transactions you make and how you utilize this capital can provide you with a return on investment that's at least as good as the risk-free rate. So what are the challenges that these different stakeholders face? Well, if we look at users, optimistic settlements are actually kind of a potential challenge. You could assume that it's a big security assumption, because what we're assuming is that we're delegating the validity of the execution to oracles that assume that the transaction was carried on properly by the solver. So effectively, we're shifting the risk to third-party oracles, and most of the time, if your transaction doesn't get if a transaction that's been executed doesn't get challenged, this is what an optimistic settlement is about, it just goes through. I don't know if that's actually a straightforward concept to everyone, but in essence, once a transaction is executed, there is the need for a protocol and an oracle system to communicate messages between chains to prove that the transaction was executed according to the user terms. And currently, that's a big, that's a security assumption that's made that is not made when you follow the typical EOA transaction flow model. Another one is the off-chain execution logic. For users, that's also a challenge because actually most of the competition types, whether Dutch auctions or others, they sit off-chain. That means that any kind of settlement network or protocol orchestrating these competitions are free to design the competitions as they wish, and hence there is a higher likelihood that these competitions can be tampered with and manipulated when you place these orders. 5 minutes left. Okay. For solvers, another challenge that I mentioned is capital efficiency and profitability. There is right now market data that suggests that the profitability and the basis points being charged on transaction is just constantly decreasing. So the profitability for solvers is actually very questionable at this point in time. We see a lot of teams which connects actually to the third point, bootstrapping their own solver network by running their own solver, just because they need to be filling orders, and we see that this creates some big subsidization strategies for a lot of protocols where effectively they are paying solvers to solve on their network. So these are challenging happening right now for protocols, teams looking to build the systems, solvers looking to be profitable, and users looking to be fully secure. So Li.Fi 2.0, I will be quick on this one, but Li.Fi 2.0 is essentially the idea that we're going to be leveraging our existing DEX, bridge aggregation, and our API to open up the order book of our 400 plus, I think now it's 500 plus customers that have integrated the API. We work with clients like MetaMask, Robinhood, and others. And the idea for us is that we're going to be pushing forward our own intent solver integration and implementation that should be accessible for all. The benefit of this approach is that for solvers, well, there's going to be a huge order flow. There's going to be ultimately a lot of transactions to solve for. And hopefully for those long-tail assets and other type of trades, there will be the opportunity for solvers to be profitable. We also want to bring forward tooling for increasing the capital efficiency for solvers. We have already worked on a direct integration with Everclear, and more recently we also integrated with Glacis to support interrupt token standards directly within the protocol, which should make rebalancing way more efficient and easier and out of the box, essentially. When it comes to the implementation also, that we go forward with, we have not been opinionated with one particular Oracle setup on the optimistic settlements that I mentioned before, which means you are free to choose your own proof and verification system for how transactions are being settled, meaning that if you're an app developer or if you're a protocol developer, you can also leverage that and tailor it to your security needs. And for users, well, that means also that we will be offering the best execution price. Intents are great, but they are not fitting necessarily all use cases because you're always constrained to the liquidity made available by our solvers. And sometimes you might just want to use, a canonical bridge for transferring your funds from one trade to the other or executing a large trade. If you're very concerned about security, as I mentioned, it could make sense that you don't want to delegate that to solvers. And then another thing that we'll be doing is that we are also bringing forward a resource lock functionality. We're doing that with the Compact together with Rhinestone and Uniswap, and that implementation will allow us to effectively deliver those credible commitments that allow for a unified balance experience across multiple chains. If you want to become a solver on Li.Fi, please reach out to us. We are currently lining up applications and onboarding solvers. Our first and our very own solver should be available in a few weeks from now. We will be shipping a bunch of new stuff, including Zaps as well, over the coming quarter, and we're super excited to work with you all. That's it. I am 1 minute. Cool.
Anyone want to ask a question to Clement?
I feel like I talked so fast, actually. It was intense.
My question is naive, but you talked about market conditions being unfavorable for solvers. Is that just a blip you think will pass, or do you think there are other conditions affecting that?
My opinion is that it's due to the lack of maturity of those settlement networks, and I think the incentive design the incentive design from protocols is just not mature enough. So I think that currently, without heavy subsidies, it's just very hard for a solver to be profitable. And the market condition being that we are just early in that race. I think they're here to stay, but I think there's just a commoditization of solving that's happening.
Does Li.Fi solve does Li.Fi fix what you just described?
We are not looking at incentives or token or protocol design at this point in time. What we are providing is an order flow that should make it possible for solvers to capture some value. But it's a good question.
Any more questions?
So is this like a white label? Okay, no problem. Is this also meant to be like a white label for new entrants that want to offer this sort of routing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way it currently works is you integrate the API and we aggregate for you all the possible routes via our own algorithm. And then we will simply include the intent-based route as part of the aggregated list of routes available for the end user. And then you can configure and pick and choose the one you like, also expose the one you like to your customers. We have a white label B2B offering. You can integrate the solution however you like. It will just guarantee you the best execution price for your users for any cross-chain or same-chain also transaction swaps.
Thank you. We will end the talk now. We need to.
Yeah, we need to be on time. Thank you.